find good ideas. So when making any project, it's so much easier if from the beginning you start with a strong idea, and it's just going to make everything else easier, because sometimes if you don't plan things out and you just go into like directly prototyping, you can end up working a very long time on something that isn't very exciting, or you don't know if it's gonna work yet. So what I like to do is I like to start by brainstorming a strong hook. What is a hook in a game? It can be almost anything. It is the exciting bit of your game. So if a player finishes the game and tells their friend about the game, the thing they say is probably going to be the hook of the game. So it could be, well, in this game, I felt just like I could do so much and I felt really rich on my turn. Or I had a lot of turn angst. Or this game was just stunningly beautiful. There's nothing else that looks like it. So it's the unique, strong point of your game. It's the reason why a player would be interested first to play your game. And it can be, a mechanical hook. It can be a thematic hook. It could be table presence, so the way the game even just looks on the game, on your table, could hook players into wanting to find out more. How do we find a strong hook? And let's do some examples of hooks. So when looking for a hook, I find one thing that works for me is doing a twist on an existing mechanic. So the question you can ask yourself is, what if mechanic but works differently? So what if we have a game mechanic but something about it is different? To me, that's a really easy way to start to find a hook or something interesting. So for instance, a good example of an existing game is The Crew. The Crew is a trick-taking game. So there's many, many trick-taking games out there. They're the games where each player has a certain number of cards in their hand. Every player plays a card, and then the highest number in a specific suit wins. Well, The Crew says, what if it's a trick-taking game, but it's cooperative, right? What if it's a trick-taking game, but I want this player to win this specific card? How can I play my cards out so that this happens? We're not competing, we're cooperating. You can do this with almost any mechanic, like what if it's deck building, but we're building one deck. Not every player has their own deck. I don't know of a game like that, by the way. Feel free to use that idea. What if we have the game Cascadia, where you're placing tiles and building up different scoring combinations, but you're placing them all in one spot? That was actually what started our game Rise of Babel, where players have scoring like in Cascadia, but they're all doing it on one grid, so there's blocking, there's scoring off of other players, and so much comes out of that. So this is one of my favorite ways to find a hook. Another way of finding a hook is by blending two existing mechanics. So let's write mechanic, plus other mechanic. Or you can do the same thing as one game plus another game. So it's Dixit meets Seven Wonders. It's The Crew meets Exploding Kittens. What would happen then? And you kind of already have an interesting question in your head that you want to answer, and that's going to get you to finding out what that game is going to look like. Another way to find a hook is actually start with your component first. So this would be if you want to lean into the table presence. And I've only done this once. It's for a game that is not yet published, but it's one of the most interesting ways to find a hook, because you're starting out with a specific component. So that can be like, maybe it's a tree, a 3D tree that players are climbing. Maybe it's a set of gears. I've seen some games use gears where, when you take an action, it turns the gears, and then that turns the other gears, and you have this interesting component which leads to mechanical ideas. But starting with component first is really interesting because then you can build your game around something that's already interesting. You've got like a toy factor that can get you started on, well, what do things around this component look like? And your component isn't going to be just a gimmick, right? Because sometimes you'll have a hook of a component, but it can be seen as kind of gimmicky because it doesn't have use in the game, or it isn't used enough. But if you start with finding your component first hook and then building around it, then it's not going to be a gimmick. You're going to bake the gameplay into it. So these are some ways in finding a good hook. Another thing that I really like to do in a brainstorming session is to also talk about game end or player goals. So what is going to be the goal of the game? And how does the game end? So is it a competitive game or is it cooperative? And just what ends the game. So you can have a trigger such as when a deck of cards runs out. You can have a trigger which is when somebody reaches a certain amount of points. You can just have rounds. But telling players what their goal is, so if it's a cooperative game, it can be objectives. If it's a competitive game, it could be points. It could be reaching a certain game state before other players. But having a clear end goal in mind is going to help you find what actions players are doing to reach that goal. So an easy one to start out with is victory points, and then you can kind of build on, okay, well, what gives you victory points, and start answering those questions. It's just going to make it a little bit easier to make that first prototype, and if you have a hook and a goal, it can make it so much easier to get your game finished and to get your game fun quicker, because people sitting down will see your hook, and even if things don't work yet, it's not, you haven't found like the fun around it, you are working towards something which is already fun. So hopefully this helps you with brainstorming. Next, we're talking about how to make your prototype, play test it, and get the most out of that playtest.